First, I acknowledge the Native Indigenous peoples and tribal nations, including the Tewa Pueblo peoples, and our neighboring tribal nations have stewarded through time immemorial and a millennium of generations the lands and waterways of what is now the city of Albuquerque. I also acknowledge the investment that Native peoples have made in my life and in relationships with me, and thank them for the beauty that I have found within myself through those relationships. If you are here tonight, it is either because you care a lot about business or because you care a lot about me. Either way, thank you so much for being here. I am honored and I'm delighted. I hope that you enjoy this story, which tells a little bit of my cultural history. In 1863, Henry Ford was born in the farmlands of what would later become America's Rust Belt. America is connected by railroads, but for people who work in agriculture and live far from the stations, life is isolated, difficult, and often very dangerous. Ford wanted a different life for himself and for all of working class America, and he followed his engineering skills from the letter A all the way to the letter T to create the first car for the everyman, the Model T. The reliable and affordable car becomes available to the masses. Very quickly, demand exceeds supply. Ford then creates a pathway to optimize production by simplifying every task so that there was little or no training needed for the employees. Even a one-armed man could do a lot of the parts of building a Model T. With the success of the Model T and the assembly line, profits go way up. Ford wants to once again increase wages for workers who are already making more than anyone else in the field. And he wants to lower the price of the Model T to make sure everyone in America has access to safe transportation. The Dodge brothers are minority shareholders in Ford Motor Company, and they have different ambitions. They sue Ford. And in a landmark case, the Michigan Supreme Court agrees with the Dodge brothers that shareholder rights are greater than the rights of either employees or customers of a company. And this establishes shareholder primacy. This ruling eases the path for shareholders to dominate the interest of corporations going forward. The domination of shareholders adds to the already heavy burden on workers. As part of the New Deal, President Roosevelt enacts the Labor Protection Act. However, Southern lawmakers from former slaveholding states intentionally exclude agricultural and domestic workers from these protections. The people who do the most essentially life-sustaining work in our nation do not have a protection from the hierarchy of business structure and the pressure of shareholder primacy. By the mid-1970s, wealth was starting to become concentrated, but a factory job was still a ticket to a comfortable life. This is the life I was born into. In the mid-70s, I was born into the underbelly of the Rust Belt, in the RV manufacturing capital of the world, Elkhart, Indiana. I grew up on public assistance, and I worked nights hand soldering printed circuit boards in a factory to pay my way through community college, where I studied education. One of my professors told me that children will learn regardless of the environment they're in, and a lot of the time, they learn in spite of their teachers and in spite of that environment. I took my professor's words to heart and stepped into a world of fringe educators where we collaborated with our students to discover the best environment to foster their learning and build our community. Next, I ventured into the world of corporate America, and I learned quickly that I could play the game pretty well. It was an educational time for me as a business person, and it gave me the means to start my own company. In 2005, I started a company that provided residential and community supports for people with developmental disabilities throughout the state of New Mexico. We were funded exclusively by the state and federal government. The work is really fulfilling and beautiful, but working as the buffer between the people doing the work and the hierarchy controlling the work put a huge amount of pressure on us. In 2018, the core team and I began to actively dream about what it would look like if we could support the most vulnerable among us without the pressure of that hierarchical system on us. And in 2022, we sold our successful and established company and invested those resources and all of our hearts into building Biscochito. Having seen how caregivers are beaten down by poor working conditions and culturally accepted practices of abuse and disrespect, we begin an organization driven to change the way caregivers are valued. Somewhat naively, we thought we could use the existing hierarchical structure and add things like benefits and paid time off and support groups, and that would be enough. What we learned was that we couldn't gain the trust and engagement of these essential workers while still operating in the hierarchical system that had crushed them for more than a century. The systems and containers that we have in place are crushing so many of us. Just like in the classroom, when I asked my students what they needed, when we explored what would create the most beautiful environment for their learning, we started to do that at Biscochito. And we started to explore what would support the most beautiful work and the most beautiful care. The existing command and control hierarchical structure doesn't serve our work. Rather, it crushes the people doing the work. For our work to be excellent, to be beautiful, we are creating a new container. A container that's structured like an aspen grove, with thousands of seemingly separate trees, supported and being supported as part of a whole. We're inspired by Jack Stack's approach to open book management in The Great Game of Business, by Tony Hsieh's implementation of holacracy at Zappos, the research and teachings of Jim Collins, Brené Brown, Simon Sinek, and Adam Grant, and by Stoic philosophy and bell hooks. Thank you all so much.